It is May 4th, which means that it is Star Wars Day, and it is also a Tuesday, which means that it is the day I put out new videos and we get to explore the wonders that are CSS. Let's combine those wonders of CSS with Star Wars to make this CSS Only Lightsaber. You can turn it on, it has a nice little sound effect, you can change the color of it, turn it off, have a whole bunch of fun with it. Let's go and see how we can do this. Hi there, my friend and friends, and of course my Star Wars fanboys and fangirls. Welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, my name is Kevin, and here I help you fall in love with CSS, and if not fall in love with it, at least be a little bit less frustrated by it. And what better way to do it than build this really fun lightsaber? Let's go and dive in and see how we can do it. Alright, so here we are in CodePen. I have put a link to this down below if you want to go in and play with the code, fork it off, do your own stuff with it, whatever you want. But if we come and just take a really quick look, I'm not going to style this up. We have some things here, so we will be able to change our colors. So that's just a set of label and inputs here that we'll take a look at a little bit later, but no styling needed for there. What's important is this div of lightsaber. And in here, what I've done is I have an input, which is my checkbox that we can see right here on the screen. And then we have my blade, and then we have the label for here. And so we're gonna have the blade itself, which is gonna come up and down, and then the hilt, which is the handle. All right, and so we have the two parts. Now I've made the label itself will be styled as the handle, just because we want to make it so when we click on the handle, the lightsaber will open and close. So this is the easiest way to do it. I don't think I would necessarily do something like this in a production site, but we're not making a production site. We're just having some fun. But there are a lot of good things that we can learn along the way here too. So let's go and take a look at how we're going to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's style the hilt first, and then we'll worry about the blade afterward. You can see I do have some styling here. It's just setting up some grid templates and stuff so things are in the right place once everything is said and done. So what I'm going to do is let's go grab our hilt. So dot hilt, and actually there's two things we want to do. There's the hilt, but we also have the input of our on off here. So let's select that right now too. That's my on off. And we're just going to do a position of absolute, so it's not in the flow of our document anymore. We'll just say width of 0, height of 0, so it will just disappear and we can't see it because we don't want it to be visible. And maybe I'll turn that back on as we're going through so we can understand how all of this is happening. To start with, on my hilt here, let's just give this a display of block because it is a label, which is an inline element normally, so this will help us give it a width. We'll go with a 0.75 rem for now. We can always modify that, and a height of 7 rem right there. And of course we can't see it. We're going to give it a regular background for now. So we'll just say background color is red, just so something actually shows up on the screen. There we go. So that is my hilt right there. We're going to make this look like a lightsaber a little bit. So that's good. And actually one more thing that I'm going to do, that's my label. So let's come here. I'm going to put a comment. So we're going to say, this is my lightsaber itself. Lightsaber styling. Starts here, lightsaber styling. So this other part is the color pickers. That's there. Then we get to the lightsaber styling. So the lightsaber itself will be a grid column. I'm just doing this to get it in the middle of my screen, -1. So that should go in the middle of the viewport now, because there we go. That's perfect. And then what I want to do, I think we're going to need a position of relative on here later. So relative. Okay. So the hilt there. Yeah, so now I want to round those off on the bottom. So to be able to round that, I don't want to round the top. I only want to round the bottom. So on my border radius, which is a shorthand property, we can do 0, 0. So it's top left, top right. And then we want to, then it's clockwise, just like your margins and everything else. Except instead of starting top, it starts top left. So then we can do like a 4 pixel or something like that. So just to round off the bottom a little bit. If it's too much, we could always drop that down. I just want a little bit of rounding so it's not too hard of an edge. I'll stick with 4. If you like something else, again, you could fork this and do what you want with it, and then share it with me on Twitter and let me know what you've done with it. Now, the focus and the way I'm actually going to style this is using a background image, which is going to be a linear gradient. So linear gradient. And then the easiest thing to do, we're going to have a lot of gradients on here. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to explain how it's working and then fast forward because it's going to be really boring to watch me do the whole thing. So if you have a linear gradient, the first color I want is, I'm going to go with the silver here, and I want it to start at 0 and go to say 10 pixels. And then I can put a comma, and you can see the whole thing has done it, but if I put a comma, it sort of disappears. And let's just do a black of 0, 20 pixels, and we'll sort of understand what's happening by doing this. This is the different stops. So I want this to start at 0 and go to 10. So it's going from 0 to 10 pixels. We have my silver. Then I want my black to, I really want it to go from 10 to 20. And then as soon as we have another color in here, so if I put a comma and then say, we'll use gold of 0, 30. And just so you can see, we're going to start getting stripes on this. Now, if I took off these first ones, it's going to start fading into one another. So see how it blurs one to the next one. So if you only have one value, it's saying, this is where I want you to be, and it's going to fade from one to the other. But when you put in steps like this, what it's saying is start here, end here, start here, end here, start here, end here. It's not really ending because it's going all the way. But it's making it so we're forcing them to overlap a little bit, sort of, by having 0 at the beginning of each one. It means like the start of this one, it can't be before 20 pixels, so it actually ends up starting at 20. So like if I did 20 pixels here and I put 10 pixels here, I'd have the exact same effect. So as long as this number is the same or smaller than the one that came before it, it's just going to make a straight line. So the easiest thing to do if you need this straight line effect is just put 0 on the first one of each. Now I'm going to base this really loosely on Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, just because when I was growing up, I watched the episodes in reverse order, and this is the one that I first saw. I saw episode 6 first, I was in love with it, and I thought Luke was the most badass guy. So we're going to start with green and this one right here, and then we'll add the other colors afterward. So I'm going to leave this off screen. I'm just going to stick it here so I can see it. And I'm going to fast forward this part as I just come up with all these color stops along the way, because it's going to be kind of boring to watch me do everything here. All right, so it's not perfect, but hey, I think we're getting close enough in how it's looking. So we do have this thing here is going to look something like that. I'm not going to go overdo it. We're going to have a hilt that looks like that for our lightsaber. Next up, we want to actually style the blade here. So let's jump into that. Now we get, I guess, to the more fun stuff of styling the blade. This is what we're probably here for, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is, I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do a position of absolute. And that also means... and the reason I want to do that is just so I can keep this in the middle of the area. So when the blade comes up, it's coming up here and not like the blade's going to extend and shrink. And I don't want the handle to move when the whole thing is extending and shrinking, basically. So this will prevent that from happening. So first, let's give it a background of white, just so we have a nice white blade that's going to come up. Let's give it a height. And the height here, we can do, let's try 300% and a width of 100%. That should make it show up, right? There it is. So we have a blade. Now we'll say bottom is 0. So no, the bottom will be 100%. So that means the bottom is 100% offset from the bottom. So it's looking at the height here. So 100% offset means the bottom starts at the top, because we're pushing 100% of the way away from the bottom. So there we go. So I think that's not bad. Maybe this could actually be a little longer. So 350 there. And that looks, I think that's like a nice ratio, but obviously I don't like the balance there. So let's just come on the whole lightsaber. Let's just give this a margin top of like 20, viewport height. So the whole thing will just push down a little bit, and maybe we can even do a 25. There we go. Perfect. And then what we need to do is also do a border radius. We want the top to be round, so 50%, 50%, 0, 0. Should round the top of it and not the bottom, except not like that. Ooh, that's terrible. So if you do 50%, it's going to do something like this, often where it makes ovals out of shapes. So instead of that, what I'm actually going to do is we'll just say 100 VW, 100 VW, because it's not looking, there you go. Then you get the nice pill shape. So it's different in how it's calculating it. Percentage will look at a percentage of itself, whereas the VW, like, it can't round it more than what it's doing here. It makes just a perfectly nice round corner. So if you need pill shapes, don't use percentages, use ridiculously large numbers, and it will work. There we go. So that's the right shape to it. Now we need a glow. So there are a few different ways we can do a glow. I'm going to start with a box shadow. It's going to be a little bit too subtle, but we're going to start with that anyway. But I could just say here 001M lime green, just so we have something, and it's glowing. Look at that, perfect. But it's not really, and this is like 100% opacity. It seems to be lacking a little bit. So one thing I always liked with the lightsabers, especially on a dark thing, like when it has a nice big glow. So we're going to add it to this glow a little bit. So one way you can do this is with multiple shadows. So what I'm going to do is here I do have an I'm going to use HSL, and we're going to use the new HSL syntax just because it's a little bit easier. But what I've done up here is I have a blade hue 120 as a hue in HSL. So HSL, hue, saturation, lightness. The hue is the color, so 120 happens to be green. We're going to look at the colors a bit more once we start diving into changing it. So that means here, let's start with 120, comma 50%, comma 50%. This one doesn't matter. Hue, saturation. We'll go with 100 actually, 100 saturation. This way, when we change our color, it's always going to have pure saturation, so it'll always be really bright. And then the 50% lightness here is to give it the lightness that we want it to have. So by doing 50%, like if you go higher than 50%, you're pushing into the whites. And if you go lower than 50%, you're darkening it, you're pushing toward the blacks. So if you want like the pure color, it's always gonna be 100% here and a 50% there, and you'll get as pure of that color as you can get. But as I said, we want to put in multiple ones here. So what we can also do is do slash and then choose the alpha value that you want. So I can do /1 and it's 100%. There's no fading here. But if you do want to do the slash, there's no commas. There's the new syntax. So 120 is the color, 150 over a value of 1. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch out this for var color, it's blade hue. So we can switch that out right there, and we can see that, hey, that looks pretty good, I think. So now, as I said though, the glow is not as intense as I would like it. So we can increase this glow by having multiple shadows. So let's copy this shadow and actually, we can actually put 2, and I think it'll probably be more intense, except you need commas in between them. So see, there we go. We got a more intense one because we have overlapping shadows. So that's kind of cool. But what I'm actually gonna do is we'll do 1M on that one, then like a 1.5 on this one. But with that 1.5, and actually, I mean, I wasn't planning on doing it this way. Let's just copy that with the comma. So let's paste, paste, paste. Take the comma off the last one. So this one can go 2, 2.5, and then maybe a 3, or maybe a 4, or like yeah, we could do 1, 2, then this one could actually go up to like a 3, and then this one a 5. So we're getting more and more of a blur on each one. Oh, look at that. It's already looking pretty good. And so we can see that that's really intensifying it a lot. Now they're all 1, so it means they're all really strong, and I think maybe it's a little bit too intense. So here could be like a 0.75, 0.5, 0.3, 0.15 or something like that, just so each one is a little bit less intense than the last one. It's getting actually, I sort of like maybe this one, we can keep it at a 0.5. And you can play around with it like that. The one thing I'd like to do with this is also make it sort of a little bit of a pulsy glow, instead of just having this glow on this here. And I'm actually gonna, we'll go with like a 0.2 maybe. There we go. Okay. So right away, we're getting a nice sort of fading out blurry type of thing here. So the smallest one is the most intense, and maybe even like a 0.8 on that might be a nice idea. And then a 0.7, something like that. So I think that's a really nice start, and it's a good starting place. But what we can do is to add that little bit of an extra glow. We can come on my blade. We'll do a blade after. And on my blade after, what we can do is come in with a, so it's an after. We need to have a content property on here. Then with the content, we're also going to do a position of absolute on this one as well. We can do a top of 0, left of 0. I want it to be the same size as my actual blade. Right of 0 and a bottom of 0. So if we give that a background of red, just so we can see it. But of course, when you write background, you got to spell it properly for it to actually come in. There we go. So you can see it's coming in right there. And then what we can do just to get the same shape and make sure that it keeps that shape at the top is a border radius of inherit. So it inherits it from its parent, which is the blade itself. There we go. I don't want to do an overflow hidden on the blade itself instead, just because of what I'm going to do on the next step, which is to throw a filter on here. So we're going to do a filter, blur, and maybe like a 2M. And we can barely see it now. Let's try a 1M, or maybe even a maybe 2.5 or a 0.5. I don't want a really strong blur. Maybe a 0.5 will be perfect. Now it looks weird because it's covering my blade up and it's also the wrong color. So here we'll do our HSL var blade hue 100%, comma 50%, and I'm going with the wrong syntax. Again, we don't need the commas anymore. I'm just so used to it. So if you look at the green, the intensity of the green now, and let's just turn this guy off for a second. So just see how like that makes it really like a more intense green everywhere. Now it is making it more intense here too, and we could just overlap more shadows and stuff here, I guess. But the reason I want to do that is because what I'm going to do is throw let's come on here and give it an opacity of 1. And then we can come on here and say at keyframes. We'll call it glow pulse. I think that makes sense. And on my pulse, what we're going to say is 50% has an opacity of 0.5. So now we can say on here, we have an animation of pulse. I'm going to do linear. We'll say like 5 seconds and infinite, just so it always just keeps on looping. And now, if we pay attention to it, you can actually see it's fading in and out. It's really going to show on the blade itself right now because the color of it's actually covering where the white is, which we don't want to have, obviously, but it just shows a bit more of it. It's a really subtle effect, and it's a lot easier to do it on the opacity, and it also has better performance than doing it on the box shadows themselves. So that's why I sort of like this approach for doing it. It's just going to look like it's this really slight pulsing type of thing going on. So last thing we can do here is a Z index of -1. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're pulling the pulsing thing behind the content itself here. So we're not on top of the white blade anymore. And actually another thing we could do here is a really small, we could come on this and say inset of 0, 0, maybe like 4 pixels. And then my 8, let's just copy this. Copy that, paste it right here. And then this could even be a 1. So we got a really small green coming on the inside too. So it's not only on the outside. I think that effect looks a little nicer. So the edge of it just has that really bright, subtle glow. I just think it adds that extra touch that looks really, really good on there. Super duper awesome. The next thing I want to be able to do now is make this be able to turn on and off. And we're going to do that using the checkbox that we have here. So the checkbox, we can't see it, but we've turned this label into this label is activating this checkbox. So just to show you that it's working, here where we turned it off, let's turn it back on, just so we can actually see it. And where's my checkbox? We'll turn off the position absolute as well. So there, it's in the middle. So right here, there's a little white box that's floating around. So there you can see I've clicked it. Now if I click on the hilt itself, it's also clicking it because a label that's connected to a checkbox will activate that checkbox when it's clicked. So that is why I have this here. And whoops, let's get rid of that. There we go. So that's the reason that I wanted this checkbox here. This is a common hack that you can use for all sorts of fun things with CSS. And what we're going to do with it is we'll come here and we're going to say that my, so let's look at my HTML here for a second. So we have my label. Now, when I click on we don't have to worry about the label. We have to worry about the checkbox. So when the checkbox is clicked, we want the blade to be up. And when it's not clicked, we want it to be down. Now, I could include some of the stuff on the blade itself here. And I'm going to add an extra selector, though, just because I think it makes it a little bit more clear. So let's say turn lightsaber on and off. So to do that, we can say that my on, off, we'll start with checked. So when on off is checked, we can even say plus blade, so plus dot blade. So on off plus blade, this is the adjacent sibling selector. So if blade is an adjacent sibling to on off when on off is checked. So when the checkbox is open, then what we want is to say that the blade has a transform, scale up and down. So we only need the scale Y, and we're going to say a 0. So when it's scale 0, it's all the way down. And then, scale 1, sorry. When it's checked, it's 1, so it's up. Then what we want to do is, this is where the magic happens, I guess, on, off, not checked. Then we have the blade, same thing. We want the exact same guy as we have here, but the scale will be 0. So now it should disappear. So that's good. So when the on-off is not checked, my blade is shrunk away. And then when we click on it, that can grow. Haha, yes, we've done it. Except the one thing, you'll notice that this has actually put the glow in front, which we didn't have a second ago. Okay, so what's happened now, actually, this is interesting because we're using a transform on the blade itself. it's created a new stacking context. I'm not going to deep dive what that means exactly, but it pretty much means this -1 Z index on my blade is having no effect now, because it's before the after was in the stacking context, I think, was for the entire lightsaber itself. So we could go -1 and be behind the elements that are inside of there. So it could actually go behind its parent. Now the transform on there is given blade its own stacking context, so the siblings can't escape outside of the blade. They're self-contained in there, so we can't go behind its parent anymore. So what I'm going to do is take off this because it's not doing anything, and what we can do to fix that is come in with a blade before. So we need some content on there. I'm not optimizing my code here, obviously, because with pseudo elements like this, you could combine these into a bit of a selector. Top 0, bottom 0, right 0, left 0, and that's good. And then background is white. It's a little bit messy that we have to do this, but I don't think we have another option. So let's turn it on. Content, we need a position of absolute. So now it's always going to shrink away. So it's working because you can see it's squared off the top. So that means here we can say the background is there, border radius. We can also use that inherit trick here. So it's keeping that one. And we'll come in with a Z index and just make it a big number. I already have a position of absolute, so the Z index will work. So now the white is in front of the green glowy thing. So it doesn't take away from that white pureness in the middle of the lightsaber. So there we go. Quite a bit of work just to get around that, but sometimes we got to do things like that. So my lightsaber can turn on and off, but we don't want it just to turn on and off. They always sort of grow, and they go really fast, but they still do grow. So we want to come up to the blade itself for this one, and I'm going to come after the box shadow and do a transition. My transform over like 50 milliseconds, ease out. Maybe this is one where you could come in with a better timing function, but we'll go with that. There we go. Oh, except it's growing from the middle. So then we want a transform origin of bottom. Talking through everything I'm doing here so I don't make any spelling mistakes. And now, there we go. It grows up and down from the bottom. I'm going to make this even faster. Maybe that is too fast, actually. Let's go back to 50 here. You get to choose what speed you want if you want to rebuild this. But there we go. We get a nice grow and shrink animation going on with that. So we can go, and we're going to add the sound, don't worry. But there we go. So that's working really well. I like that a lot. So now we want to be able to change the colors of them, and then we'll look at how we can activate the sound after that. We're sort of going to use the same trick that we used for the checkbox here, because I did set this with a custom property, right? So here, if we look, I have my blade hue on the root, and so my blade hue is 120. So custom properties are inherited. So it means that this 120 is set on the root, but it's a little bit like setting your font family. You set your font family on your body and everything inside inherits it. But if you want on a paragraph after that, you can overwrite that, right? So what that means is you can do the same thing with custom properties. Now this depends on how you set them up. I'm just going to let you know there are times where it doesn't work the way you'd expect it to, but in this situation it should. Where let's just say somebody clicks on blue. What we want to do is the end effect. This is what I want. So the end effect is if we have my lightsaber and I define the custom property here and I say that my blade hue is actually purple, that when we click on that, the hue has to be a number. Let's just do, 360 be red. So let's do 360. So when we do that, now you can see that it's actually red because I've redefined the custom property at a more specific place so we can overwrite what the one in the root was. So let's take advantage of that, where what we can say here is we don't want just that one. I want so when we click on the red, so that is my input that has the ID is equal to red. The adjacent sibling, so actually before I use the plus, which is the adjacent sibling, which is I can't use that in this case. This isn't going to work because the adjacent sibling selector only works, so here's my input and here's my blade. So with this, when I use the hack there to get this to open and close, and I use the plus, the blade has to follow exactly after the checkbox. The difference between that and the tilde is the tilde will be any sibling that comes after it. So not the direct one that's immediately after it, but any sibling that comes any time after it. So even though my red is all the way here, and there's other stuff that's in the way, my lightsaber is still a sibling. It's just not the direct, like the instant. It's not the adjacent sibling. It's just one of its preceding siblings. So as long as the lightsaber is at the same level, I can't have any nesting. It's why here I don't have these grouped together in a div. So I can't group those together to make this work. But here, now what should work, and actually this checked. So when my red is checked, and even, we could just do like that, but I'll just say input. So here, let's say, let's put a comment, change the color. So we can turn it on and then turn it on, and then I should be able to go to red and it switches to red. Ah, I love that so much. So cool. So it's rotating through the hues, and because it's rotating through the hues, we have the saturations at 100% and the lightness is at 50%. It just makes it work. So perfect. So now we just need to do that for all of them. So let's fast forward a little bit while I set this up. I hope y'all were looking at me working just before and going, why is he doing an attribute of ID when you could just use an ID selector? This is the joys of being sick. But there we go, we fixed that at the same time as I set up all my colors. The only one I haven't done is the Darksaber, because that one's going to be a little tricky. But let's open this up and let's see, blue, yellow, purple, red, and then we want Darksaber. If you don't know the Darksaber, it's a black blade with a white glow, which makes it a little bit trickier. So what I will do for the Darksaber, first we want a black blade, and that's going to be a little bit easier. So I'm actually going to select this. So we want lightsaber.blade. Actually, it's the blade before, right? Because we had to come in and add that to make it work. And the background on that will be black. So that means if we open that and we go over to the Darksaber, there we go, we have a black blade. But for the lightness of my lightsaber, when you're using HSL, you can go around with the hues, but there's no white hue. Hue is done with the L, the lightness. So I can't actually come in and change the color of it, or you can change the color of it, but I can't change the lightness of it. But what I can do is here have a blade lightness at 50%, which is again where you want it for pure saturation of colors. But what we want to do is modify that. Now I haven't set that up, so let's just come down here into my lightsaber blade. And there's the blade. So here where I set this up, what I actually want to do is select all of these and switch this out for another variable. And that means that all of these can be my var blade lightness, just like that. So it should still work fine. We still have everything working. But that means when we have our Darksaber, we can say that the blade lightness is 100. So it's going all the way up, and at 100, that means that, let's turn it on, Darksaber it, it's not working. Oh, it's not working because this should be a percentage. That's why. Let's try that again. Darksaber, there we go, we have a white blade. Now there's one color that I didn't change. So that means blade hue. So this one also, we should have my var blade lightness on it. And now that should, there we go. And I'll shrink this down because I think it might be behind my head a little. So it's there, we have the red, and then we go to the Darksaber, and we get a Darksaber. Now the one thing with the Darksaber is it's also a different shape a little bit. Let's select this one, and we're gonna say the same thing, but not the before. This is where having the inherited border radius is also gonna help us, because we wanna change the border radius on the blade. Because the Darksaber looks more like an actual sword. So I'm gonna do 20 pixels, 200 pixels, sorry, 20 pixels over 200 pixels. We'll do 10 pixels, 0, 0. So 0, 0 is the bottom. Now let's see if this worked on the top. So we're gonna open it up and switch, and there we go. So it's not perfect by any means. Even, what if I did like 100% here? I should just leave this open because it's gonna close every time, but there we go. So something like that might work a little bit. So it's getting a little bit more of that interesting shape to it. This is a split value. So this is still only looking at the top left, and it's looking at the two axes separate from one another. So, or not the, like the two sides separately from each other. I'm not going to deep dive how it works. I'll put a link down in the description, I guess, that can look more at this, because I've never covered it in a YouTube video, I don't think. Or if I have, I don't remember doing it. But yeah, it's something that I still struggle wrapping my mind around a little bit. But basically, we're doing 100% radius across the top and 200 pixels down the side. So like if I made this even bigger, maybe actually I could, maybe it's so narrow that I don't think we can actually get like a perfect shape on it. But it's going to sort of round off this side more, but then this part, the top part, is more just over. Anyway, I think that looks not too bad. It looks more like a katana sword shape. Again, the actual Darksaber is probably a different shape a little bit than that, but just to get, you know, it gets a little bit of that idea. So there we go. We have the Darksaber there too. Awesome. What's the last thing we need to do? The last thing that we need to do is to make the sound effect go. So to figure out how to do this, I found this article on CSS Tricks by Alvaro Montero. In the article, it does talk about the limitations of it. It might not work perfectly on every browser. This is just for fun, so I don't mind too much. It's not something you'd probably want to do in any normal website anyway. But what we can do is we should be able to, I have it saved in my assets. So this is, I am in CodePen Pro, so I can have my sounds here. So there you go, you can hear it going off. There you go. That was really loud, I think, for you guys, but so we have this effect that is going off. Actually, might be able to hear it through my headphones even now. It's super loud. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the URL, and we're going to put that in here. I'm going to drop it right here, and I'm going to do it in an embed and link to it that way. Now it's going to show up here. It's going to be this big ugly thing. So there we go. Now, the cool thing with embeds is, the trick here, and this is coming from that article, is the embed will fire when it goes onto a display. Play sound. So we can have the embed is a display of none. That means it's not there. It's not actually going to do anything right now because it's a display of none. It's not there. And then what we want to do is come in here and say, embed, not embed, we have to use this checkbox hack again. So we can Darksaber, no we don't, yeah, no we want any lightsaber. So I'm just gonna, it's when we turn it on, right? So this one, my on off. So we can say that my ID of on off checked is going to do checked, and then we do the same thing, embed. Again, I'm using the tilde and not the plus because it's not a direct child. It's down here. The direct child is only this, or not direct child. It's not the adjacent sibling. It's a sibling. It's not an adjacent sibling. So this is like the general sibling, I think they call it. So then my embed there would be a display of block. Let's just put this afterward. So there we go. Come on here. So it's none. It goes on. So when we click, it doesn't work because I misspelled something. Let's try that again. There we go, it worked. And the noise worked, but it went really, really big. So let's just say that this actually has a position of absolute to take it out of the flow. We'll give it an opacity of 0, a pointer events of 0 so it doesn't show up, width 0, height 0, just to make sure that it's actually like hidden away. So when it turns on, and then turns off. So let me give you the sound, the real sound here. Sorry if it's a little loud, but here we go. Oh, this is one limitation of it. The sound won't play, it only plays once. And this is sort of like the autoplay thing that browsers try and prevent. It'll play the sound one time, and then you have to refresh the page. So we can refresh the page. Then, once the page has been refreshed, we get the sound, and then we can cycle through, and we can change the colors just like that. And then we can turn it off. There we go. Pretty cool, pretty awesome. Let's look at it one more time because I think that's just so much fun. Page is refreshed. That's super cool. If you enjoyed that, I've done a few other things that are a bit more practical than that do look a lot of these neat tips and tricks. If you'd like them, check out the playlist that I put here. It's a custom playlist that just looks at a lot of the fun things that you can do with CSS to pull off stuff like this. And again, a lot of it is a bit more practical than what we did in this video. With that, a very big thank you to both Zach and Randy, who are my supporters of Awesome on Patreon, as well as all my other patrons. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.